Hey everybody, it's really hot outside. You're supposed to say, how hot is it? I've been out most of the day. I've had 3 showers today. It's hot outside. It's hotter than Satan's crotch. Perfectly fitting with my digital fireplace here. Everybody was kind of chirping and picking on me, as they typically do. People love to pick on me. Why I had not reviewed the X-T100. Well, got rid of one of my X-T1s and picked up the X-T100. Here we go. Is bare sensor. Does come with a detachable grip. Interestingly enough, they actually include an additional screw mount in case you actually lose this one. And also there's a little nubbin that fits in there, which I have laying on this table somewhere. This is actually going to be my new vlogging camera. It's very simple on top. It's actually about 60 grams heavier than the X-T2. However, like the profile, it's more a typical rectangular shape than the squared off X-T20. It does have the same EVF as the X-T20. Just for giggles and the sake of looking, I thought I'd look at Diaper Review's review of the X-T100. As is typically the case, I can't agree with them on quite a few things. The autofocus for continuous is certainly, and I actually judged it myself using 5 different lenses. And by the way, this is the lens that is permanently going to be on my X-T100. And I'm also going to use it for vlogging with the flip around front screen. And also this is a Rode mic, which oddly enough is made in Australia. You do need a 2.5 millimeter microphone jack adapter, which is only like $2 on eBay. There's the 3.5 millimeter to 2.5 millimeter jack adapter to actually plug into the microphone jack on the side. It's actually a perfect vlogging camera. I do have a couple GoPros, but this one is excellent. Cannot agree with DP Review's review of this camera. The autofocus I found out using several lenses to be approximately 25% slower for continuous autofocus than is the X-T20 or the XH1, but you know, you're paying $700 or $699 for this camera. You're not paying $1,600, so obviously the chipset for interpreting and feeding information to the lens for faster autofocus acquisition is what you're paying an additional $1,000 for in this camera, which of course is a lot bigger, and of course this has a vertical grip. Love the XH1, love Fujifilm, but I do not play favors to any camera company, including Fujifilm. I was actually incredibly surprised on getting this. I had owned an X-T10 and had reviewed and had for about 2 weeks an X-T20, which I borrowed off a local buddy. I'm actually very surprised and impressed with the X-T100. Very small, compact. You can actually see the top dial configuration is actually even simpler than that of the X-T20, but I actually found nothing lacking other than the joystick, which is also lacking off the X-T20, which I'm just used to that with the X-T2 and the XH1. Interestingly enough, things that I actually found shocking is that I had an X-T10. I found the build quality to be superior and excellent to even that of the X-T10. Interestingly enough also, the autofocus when I go to review an image, when I'm pressing around and pinching in and pinching out and dragging around and zooming in, is actually incredibly fast and extremely fluid. I could not ask for better on the touch screen on image review on the X-T100. Love the selfie screen for vlogging. Like I said, I'm actually going to permanently have the 18-135. This is going to be my go-about camera, if you will. What they say in Australia, your walkabout gear. Isn't that what they still say? Walkabout. Stuff that you actually carry with you everywhere. It's going to be my X-T100. Pop-up flash for headshots. Same thing on the X-T10 and X-T20. Simple stuff. Headshots of people. The buffer, for example, the difference, and people would want to make a comparison between the X-T20 and the X-T100. On the X-T20, you get 42 JPEGs on the buffer or 23 RAWs at a burst of up to 14 frames per second. With the X-T100, you get 26 JPEGs and 6 frames per second. So, but I mean, you're paying much less. Importantly, this is the lowest cost interchangeable lens camera, 24 megapixel sensor. Like I said, it is bare sensor. It's got really vibrant and very sharp. That's of course in-camera firmware sharpening. Very beautiful straight out of camera images, even more so than that of the X-T20, which I'm rightly familiar with. Also too is the cheapest interchangeable lens camera that you get a Fuji X mount on, and you have an EVF. Like I said, you also have the same EVF as you do on the X-T20. Obviously, the points to be made is it's not a continuous autofocus speed demon. It's a perfect entry-level camera, but I mean, I have Fujifilm's best cameras. Their GFX, their X-T2, and their X-H1 sitting right here beside me. So it's not an autofocus speed demon. You're not paying $1,700 for the camera. Actually, and you know, I've criticized Fujifilm in the past for things that I just, it's like, hey, I don't like this. Interestingly enough, one thing that Fujifilm I heard vis-a-vis people in Asia is that Fujifilm changed their lens caps. I actually did a righteous teardown of Fujifilm for their horrible lens caps, and they changed them. Fujifilm does listen to their customers. So it does not have a deep buffer like the X-T20 or the X-H1 or X-T2, but you're paying well under $1,000 less for this camera. Trying to think of some other excellent points on this. Actually, I found and since I'm incredibly familiar with Fujifilm, actually, even though the top real estate for dials is minimalistic relative to even the X-T20, I found nothing lacking. The only thing I would have liked to have had, if I'm going to complain at all, but you know, it's assignable vis-a-vis the Q menu, is one additional button. Like back here, I would have liked one additional button. There's just always one extra thing I like to be able to assign, but the only reason that I'm actually complaining about that is because I'm spoiled with the X-T2 and the X-H1, is that I have, not limitless, but, very extensive button customization assignability that I do not have on the X100T, but then, self to self, hey, it's $1,000 less for a reason. But there's nothing lacking. I said the build quality is excellent. I actually consider this to be an extremely impressive product for its price point, and I say that with no hesitation, no reservation, and with no affiliation. Those are a lot of rhyming words. With Fujifilm. This is a wonderful camera. This is actually going to be my perfect walkabout, go-about camera. I think a lot of people think I just sit behind this desk all day. I think my sunburned face might tell a different story. I was out testing. I've had a few days of testing before making a final decision on this, since a lot of people, I love the flip out. This is a feature I do not have on the X-T2. I don't have it on the X-H1. I don't have it on the $6,500 GFX, which of course the GFX is not a vlogging camera, it's a medium format camera. This is excellent. Love this little camera. I always love, the only reason I didn't have prior to this, having reviewed the X-T20, because I love the little tiny compact cameras like this. This is basically the size, and I'm not a total Sony hater. I actually like the Sony RX100 Mark III. I owned one of those. The DSC RX100 Mark IV. I owned a number 2 and a number 4. Yeah, that's correct. But I mean, that's a fixed lens camera. Obviously, it's got an internal zoom, but I mean, I could put any of my X series lenses as well as, just going to grab one of these as an example, this 85mm f1.4. Just slap on, a $15 adapter onto this camera. I have very nice focus peaking. That's also another thing that's really good to get into Fujifilm. Someone says I have a limited budget, but I have all these old Canon lenses, or I have all these old Nikon lenses. Well, $20 adapter, stick yourself in focus peaking and manual focus, obviously so, and set in your menu settings. Shoot without lens, you have a perfect camera that if you've already got lenses of some variety, you've got an adapter you can buy for really cheap and use on this camera. Obviously it's going to be manual focus until you can pick up a Fujifilm lens or two and then upgrade your camera later. But I already own the best that Fujifilm has to offer, and I'm a person that's palatalized or accustomed to, the incredibly high quality of the Fujifilm. I mean, am I spoiled? The point is that someone would think, well, if you have these best cameras isn't like having a camera like this, like a letdown because you're so used to stuff like this, you know, with absolutely every bell and whistle. And the answer is no. I mean, I have on this camera the ability to do video vlogging very easily with the mic and the 18-to-135 that's never going to come off the camera. This is the one lens that could basically do everything for me. Right here, this is it. I had this in my car all day today. Don't leave it out in the hot sun, by the way. Never do that with any camera lens. As well as the day before yesterday. Having a lot of fun with the X-T100. There's nothing lacking on it. Other than being spoiled, I would have liked the additional customizable button right here, but that's just me being a spoiled pissant. My full review on the X-T100, given the price point and the functionality of the camera, as it is still, I mean, you have the capability of shooting RAW plus fine on this camera, the same as you do on the X-T2 or the X-H1. For the price point, I consider it to be actually an extremely high value camera for what you get. Is it an entry-level Fujifilm camera? Yes and no. I mean, I have the best that Fujifilm has to offer, but I never felt like, oh God, using this camera is depressing, you know, relative to what I have, which is the best from Fuji. I did not get that impression at all in using this camera. Thankfully, of course, I didn't even have to read the owner's manual on this camera since the menu system is identical to every other Fujifilm. But I was actually impressed, and I was really, so a few things were shocking on it. The rapidity of which I was able to learn this camera since I'm so familiar with Fujifilm, that would be a no shocker to nobody. But also the fact that the build quality is even superior to that of the X-T10, which I have. Of course, it's a bottom loading, both single SD card and battery, just like the X-T10 and the X-T20 are. I think the grip is mandatory, and it does come with the camera. It's a little palm swell addition right here, and of course you can get yourself a bottom mounting grip swell. I forget the model number on that. It's like $100 basically, but I don't need it. Awesome camera. Actually, I use this with my homemade side sling strap. I use a Black Rapid Rapid Link right here, and I'm able to saddle the camera, which is what I was using today. Excellent camera. On a scale of, you know, out of 100%, I actually rate this camera, given the price point, given what it is capable of doing, you know, I give it a solid 92%. I really do. The only thing people would complain about, and you have to have proper perspective, is the 25% is what my estimation was using several different lenses, a continuous autofocus, versus that of the X-H1 or the X-T2 from Fujifilm. Is continuous autofocus about 25 or 30% slower for moving subjects? It is. So this is not a hardcore sports action camera, and I don't think anybody even suffers that delusion that it is. So that, for example, you know, other prominent reviewers have complained about that fact. Everything has to be put in its proper perspective, and you have to be logical and sensible about that, and I certainly am in reviewing this camera. So this was your request that I review the X-T100 Fujifilm. I give it a solid 92%. I really do. The only thing I would have liked is you got a lot of space up here, but I mean, that's what you're paying for. I think the only complaint I actually have is that I would have liked one additional function button. Right here. Is there anything else that, I'm trying to think of something to complain about other than that, about this camera. And I'm not, and people have actually asked me, you know, these simple, sort of ultra simple button where you actually have advanced and you actually have the landscape and the panoramic. You know, isn't this oversimplified top dial setting inhibitive? No, it's not. I mean, everything I shoot is an aperture, not most everything, usually an aperture priority, and I have that ability to do that here. Set my aperture via the camera. I have a custom function button, the F function button on the top, which is assignable to ISO, and I actually have this wheel over here assignable to a mechanical shutter and electronic shutter. So no, I actually found nothing other than a joystick, which you're not going to get at this entry point level price point of camera, nor are you on the X-T20. So honestly, other than one missing function button, I actually can't think of anything to complain about this camera. And I was, like I said, I'm surprised that the build quality was so high on this camera. Might be one other thing to complain about, but not really. I wish that it actually would come with a normal charger where you could pop the battery out and stick it in the charger and plug it in the wall. But it comes with a tiny wall wart and a USB cable for USB charging. I have this personal fetish, or anti-fetish if you will, against USB charging, but that's nothing really. I mean, I have normal external chargers, but at this price point, they just chose not to include a external charger for the X-T100, but that's no big deal. I mean, that's as far as I can go to complain about this camera. I said give it a solid 92%. The touchscreen actually was shocking how fast the touchscreen is. No lag at all, absolutely perfect. Nothing whatsoever to complain about for that. That's it. Done significant examination of this. You do have the same EVF, like I said, as on the X-T20. I think anybody would have the X-T100 would be perfectly happy with it, even if you have no Fujifilm lenses. So it's a perfect entry point into Fujifilm. You could use your existing other lenses with an adapter on this camera in manual focus, and which I've actually tested that, and the peaking on this, perfectly fine. Congratulations to Fujifilm for producing such a excellent price point camera with a 24 megapixel sensor, an interchangeable lens camera that will fit any Fujifilm X mount lens, as well as any older lens with an adapter, and also an excellent EVF. So kudos to Fuji. This is actually, as the British folk would say, a beautiful piece of kit. Within its price point, it is actually an excellent camera. That is my review of the Fujifilm X-T100. I hope you like this review. I actually got, burned my face up. Been actually out shooting the camera. I hope you don't think I sit behind this desk all the time. Some people say that I do that, but I absolutely do not. I do just do some indoor testing, however, especially when messing around with the menus and fiddling around with cameras and, going over them with a highly scrutinized eyeball. Kind of like this. This is what I do. It's like, oh, really? Oh, really? Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. Luxi veritas uvidimся, as the Russians would say. Aloha, as the Hawaiians would say. And Fuji! Bye.